Let me just say that I'm proud of all of you watching for getting into Kant. Yes, he's difficult and highly abstract, but he is one of the big players in the world of ethics. And I know in the earlier video we talked about the importance of universality and we're pretty abstract, but thankfully section 1 of the groundwork for the metaphysics of morals is a little more down to earth. He starts by asking, what can we consider to be good in itself? Or rather, what is good without any other qualification? Think about something like intelligence. We all think of intelligence as a good thing, right? But is intelligence good in itself? What if you had an evil genius trying to formulate a plan for world domination? Would you want him to have intelligence? Alright, so maybe intelligence isn't good in itself. What about courage? Courage is good, right? I mean, that's a virtue shared by both Aristotle and the Stoic philosophers. Well, would you really want courage in the hands of a would-be serial killer, on the verge of going on some spree but just needs a little bit more courage to go through with it? Of course not. So again, like intelligence, courage in the hands of someone with an evil will or intent becomes bad. But wait a minute, if a bad or evil will makes one of these virtues bad, then what about a good will? Is a good will something that is good in itself without any other qualifications? For Kant, yes. I mean, it's impossible to do bad if your will is good. I like to think of a will as a drive, what drives you, what motivates you? What are your intentions that will lead to actions? If your will is good, then the root of all your actions will be good, and it'll be impossible to do bad. But it's not so much the effects of the good will that make it good. For Kant, the good will is good in itself. A good will is good not because of what it affects or accomplishes, nor because of its fitness to attain some proposed end. It is good only through its willing, i.e., it is good in itself. Now, how do we find this good will? How do we know if we have a good will? Kant says the good will can be highlighted by examining the concept of duty. Therefore, we shall take up the concept of duty, which includes that of a good will, though with certain subjective restrictions and hindrances, which far from hiding a good will or rendering it unrecognizable, rather bring it out by contrast and make it shine forth more brightly. I know when we think of duty, we usually think of some drill sergeant or authority figure yelling at us to do something that we really don't want to do, but we have to do it anyway. But let's really dive into what Kant means by duty, because after all, if we understand what duty is, we might be able to recognize if we do actions out of duty, and that could help us possibly recognize our own goodwill. Let's first understand what Kant doesn't mean by duty. Firstly, doing something for some other end than a duty is not doing something out of respect for that rule. For example, let's say you see a wallet on a table and the owner is looking away. You could steal it, which goes against the duty of not stealing, which would obviously not be abiding by that duty. But if you refuse to steal it because you're afraid of being caught, then that's also not acting in accordance with that duty, because you decided not to steal it out of fear for repercussions, not out of respect for the duty of not stealing. If, however, you see the wallet, but solely out of respect for the duty of not stealing, you refuse to steal, then you'd be doing your duty, and that could highlight a goodwill in this case. Moral worth for Kant only comes when you do a good deed solely out of respect for that duty, and no other external motivations. This makes one intent very important to Kant, rather than the results of an action which we might find in utilitarianism or other consequentialist philosophies. The good found in an action is not so much its intended effects, but the duty to the rule or maxim. An action done from duty has its moral worth, not in the purpose that is to be attained by it, but in the maxim according to which the action is determined. I think it's time for an example to tie this all together. This channel's name combines my two loves, philosophy and comics, so this example is taken from the latter. Let's say we have a surgeon, and this surgeon saves a young boy's life who got shot in the head. He does this because it's his duty as a surgeon to save lives. Unbeknownst to him, the boy grows up to be a serial killer and murders multiple people. Now someone might say the surgeon was in the wrong for saving the boy, because he, in effect, saved someone who led to the deaths of multiple people, therefore causing the deaths of those people. But no, Kant would say that the surgeon doing his duty of saving his life would still have moral worth. Even if, down the line, the serial killer gets shot and is again in critical condition, the surgeon would be doing the moral thing of yet again saving his life, even with the knowledge that the patient is a serial killer. Because it's not the effect of our actions that determine their moral worth. It's our duty to the moral rule, in this case saving a life. Now we've been talking about these moral rules like don't steal and save lives. But what exactly are these moral rules? Well, that's Kant's next mission, to think up some rule that can be considered good regardless of the effect and is good without qualification. This leads Kant to his first formulation of something called the categorical imperative. I should never act except in such a way that I could also will that my maxim should become a universal law. There's a lot of terminology in there, so let's break it down. Maxim essentially means rule or principle, and this maxim is brought about by an action. For example, if I tell a lie, then the maxim I'm pushing is that it's okay to lie. So Kant is saying that we should not act in a way that the rules or maxims of that action should become universally applied, or become a universal law. So again, same example. If I tell a lie, the maxim of that action is that lying is okay. Kant then wants us to consider whether we'd want that maxim to become universal in a way that everyone would follow it. In this example, that means, would I want to live in a world where everyone follows the rule that lying is okay? Would I want to live in a world where everyone lies? Of course not. Therefore, I shouldn't lie. One way to simplify the categorical imperative is to equate it to the golden rule of do unto others as you would have done to yourself. And while it's a good way to easily understand it, it's not the full picture. I'd say a more accurate simplification would be do unto others as you would have done to yourself and everyone else in the world. Because a universal law doesn't mean you're the only one affected, but everyone else. So your friends and family, would you really want them to be lied to as well? One common criticism of Kant is how a masochist would apply the categorical imperative. The reasoning being that a masochist is fine with having pain inflicted upon himself, therefore he could inflict pain on others. But if we really take the rules universally and apply it to everyone, would the masochist be fine with having pain inflicted on his family, his friends, his other loved ones? So the next time you're about to do something morally questionable, Kant wants us to ask ourselves, would we really be okay if everyone else in the world did what we were doing? Going back to our surgeon example, we would want our surgeon to save lives, because we would hope that everyone else would follow the maxim of save lives in danger. Don't worry about context specifics and who the person in danger is or what effect it would have, because we want these rules to be applied universally. So there you have it, our first formulation of the categorical imperative for Kant. But what is a categorical imperative anyway? And if there are other formulations, does that mean there are other rules? That'll all be covered in the next part coming out next week. After I get all these Kant videos out, I'm thinking about just stitching them all together in case you guys find it more convenient to have just one super long video covering this book. But regardless, if you enjoyed this video, then be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. And with that, I wish you all a beautiful rest of your day.